Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Fahrbach. NATO's chiefs of defense are meeting in Brussels a day after President Trump's Davos speech, where he appeared to back down from his Greenland tariffs and military threats, signaling a shift toward a possible long-term framework deal. While Trump emphasized U.S. security and mineral interests, European leaders continue to stress Greenland's sovereignty and the rights of its people. Joining us to reflect on what this means for NATO, Europe, and the broader future of transatlantic relations is Eoin Micheál McNamara, researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you back on TVP World. All right, so just make sure that we can hear you clearly. I'm just going to ask you that first question. I mean, looking at all of these last events of the past 24 hours, what does this mean in terms of this? We have scant details on it, but apparently brokered by the Secretary General himself, Mark Rutte, this forever deal. What could this possibly entail, and how significant is it that NATO is involved through Mark Rutte? All right, so we are speaking to an expert here on the latest, and we were just digesting what's happened from Davos, and of course that NATO meeting that's happening also in Brussels, and we're just speaking about that this morning. And just a recap, I mean, this idea that Donald Trump has stepped back from this whole threat of actually seizing the island of Greenland. I mean, this has caused so much tension between the alliance. It's also now seen sort of on the brink that there was some kind of deal, apparently, that Donald Trump did meet Secretary General Mark Rutte yesterday on Wednesday, and this was the breakthrough that the world came to the edge. I stepped back, and we're trying to assess what this means for the NATO alliance. And I mean, this is something that has really stunned a lot of experts, and I think the world is looking at this and seeing what this could mean. Now, apparently, there's a deal that is sort of in the offing, but we're scant on the details, and we're looking at that now with our expert here joining us. Eoin, can you hear me now?
Yes. Great
Perfect.
To be here once again, and apologies for that slight technical error.
No worries. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about the scant details we have of this whole idea that Trump has apparently settled with Secretary General Rutte. What does it mean for the alliance?
Well, I think the message that many experts and many politicians who have opposed Trump's discourses and Trump's rhetorics on Greenland over the past few weeks, I think that message has I mean, nothing really gets through to Donald Trump subtly, but I think that message has gotten through to Donald Trump. If he needs extra defense assets on Greenland, he can have them through the 1951 defense agreement between the United States and Greenland. This supports U.S. defense without any need to escalate a major trade war. That would be very, very bad for the United States and for Europe at a critical time in global geopolitics, where the Russians are essentially at the gate, threatening Euro-Atlantic security. So I think that picture was delivered by Mark Rutte. There was discussions, Trump was given an off-ramp, and it appears for now that he may have taken that off-ramp.
Mm-hmm. You called it an off-ramp there. Now, I think it would be curious to find out, was this always going to be the case? I mean, we're trying to kind of get your sense here that he was always using this sort of maximalist designs to then get that off-ramp, or was it because of the pressure of the Europeans of the last days? Was it the flattery of Mark Rutte, perhaps, that has come to this point? What was, in your mind, the main ingredient here that we did get this change of heart from Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, a lot of commentary has pointed to the dive on the stock market a number of days ago when the Europeans announced that there would be retaliatory trade measures introduced in response to Trump's behavior. Trump does consider the economic situation very closely, although not as closely enough as we would have originally thought a number of years ago with Trump's business background. But from what I can see from the details, and a lot of the details are currently unclear, the status quo remains the same from what we had before this crisis a number of weeks ago. Trump can have access to Greenland for US defense assets. Denmark is more than happy to allow the United States to have those assets. And this crisis seems completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. We have seen, though, certain amounts of, let's say, NATO personnel that were moved to Greenland those last few days. The Danes themselves, I mean, these are not huge numbers, but nevertheless, this is the kind of, let's say, deployment that we rarely see, especially countering an ally. There's this call now from France, from President Macron, to actually have a NATO exercise in Greenland. I mean, where do we move on from here? How much has the cohesion of this alliance potentially been damaged as of this, command and control, etc.? What is the mood now in your mind as these defense chiefs meet? And then if any other exercises go forward, I mean, how is the mood going to be towards the United States partners in all this?
Yeah, it was a strange one. Of course, I mean, and there was a lot of strategic confusion around that. Maybe that had a role in Trump's thinking as well, that the Europeans are taking this seriously. And, you know, going on his speech yesterday, I mean, Greenland is not simply a piece of ice. It is an important part of NATO territory and the Euro-Atlantic Security Order, and the Europeans will take their commitments there seriously. That's what the Europeans were signaling. Of course, I mean, Trump has definitely inflated the threats to Greenland from Russia, maybe China as well, more economic threats when we talk about China. And with him inflating the threats, I mean, there's always been concerns for the future about Greenland, not necessarily the present. I mean, China's military reach is very limited. Indeed, Russia's military reach is quite limited as well. So, although Russia, in a hybrid way, with its submarines, with some of its other naval vessels, with its submersibles, can have a hybrid threat in and around the fjords of Greenland to try and get in amongst the cracks in Euro-Atlantic security. That these threats aren't the most serious threats we face, but Greenland is important, and the alliance as a whole needs to stick up for its security, rather than getting bogged down in very, very difficult divides that could tear the whole NATO alliance apart. So I'm glad, and I think many other people are glad, that we appear to be stepping away from that brink.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think someone who will be watching this closely will be Vladimir Putin. I mean, if we're looking at now, I want to get your sense of that as well. We know that Steve Witkoff is en route to Moscow. Also, from various outlets, we're hearing that President Zelensky is going to be meeting Donald Trump in Davos today. Where do we stand with all this? How much has this also impacted support? I mean, there was already a pullback of some ways from the United States to support for Ukraine in terms of assets. How will this affect any kind of peace negotiations in these next sort of few days?
Well, I mean, Trump and his negotiators have moved on. Maybe they get a sense that there is some opportunity for success here that they can claim and make this look like a very successful trip to Europe. They got a deal with Mark Rutte on Greenland, and they're edging towards a deal with Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, and indeed Vladimir Putin of Russia rather, and President Zelensky of Ukraine. But a lot remains to be seen in that regard. One thing that hasn't helped, and I keep going back to my old points here, is that this crisis manufactured by Donald Trump within the NATO fold certainly hasn't helped. I mean, I've watched many news channels over the past few days, as many people would have. I mean, there's a serious energy crisis now in Ukraine because of Russian bombing of Ukrainian infrastructure. And it's not making even the top 5 or the top 10 issues on many news channels because everyone is focused on the kerfuffle around Greenland, when the most important thing I think we need to do in Euro-Atlantic security right now is focus on Ukraine and supporting Ukraine and indeed the people in Ukraine because their suffering is considerable.
Just before we close, I want to get your sense. I mean, with all this, what's happened these last few days with NATO, a lot of stretching, a lot of backward brinkmanship. Where do you see the alliance now? Is this just a momentary crisis? Things will be settled? Is NATO heading in a new direction? I mean, there's other kind of defense alliances. If we're looking at Jeff, for instance, with the UK and Nordic countries, how is NATO going to continue now?
I think a lot of people would like this or like to think that this is a momentary crisis and we can go back to business as usual. But all of these incidents, all of these episodes with Trump that Trump seems to desire are definitely breaking down trust in the alliance. And security is very, very important in this current threat environment, you know, with China, with Russia, and the Europeans are now seeing that. So we're definitely heading to towards a more European-led NATO, and probably to hedge on that, I hope we will be taking further steps to build up European strategic autonomy to ensure that we're not left in the lurch by the US into the future. So I think that's the big lesson here for the European Union.
All right. So thank you so much for all those insights. Always a pleasure to have you on here. That was our guest here, Eoin Micheál McNamara. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks. But stay right here for more news and commentary on TVP World. Goodbye.